My name is Colleen Bauer. I'm 52 years old, and I gave 6 years of my life to the woman who raised me, only to find out that the day after we buried her, I was the one who'd be locked out. I want to start with the moment, because that's the moment that still wakes me at 3 in the morning. It was a Tuesday. The funeral had been Monday. I hadn't slept, hadn't really eaten. There was a tray of someone's lemon bars going stale on the counter, and I remember thinking I should throw them out and not being able to make my hands do it. I was standing in my mother's kitchen in Westerville, Ohio, in the same house I'd been driving to every single day for 6 years, when I heard a car door in the driveway. Two car doors, actually. And when I looked through the window over the sink, I saw my sister Bridget walking up the front path in a gray blazer I'd never seen, and beside her, a man in a suit carrying a leather folder. Bridget didn't knock. She put a key in the front door, a key I didn't recognize, shiny, freshly cut, and let herself and the lawyer into the house where I had just spent the last 6 years of my life. She looked at me standing there in my mother's kitchen and she said, "Oh, Colleen, I didn't think you'd still be here. I didn't think you'd still be here." To the daughter who had been there for 2,000 days. Let me back up because you need to understand who I was before this and how a reasonably intelligent woman ends up blindsided in her own mother's kitchen. Our mother was Eleanor. She was diagnosed when I was 46, early stage, the kind of thing where the doctors give you a long, careful speech about quality of life and support systems. I was the support system. I was divorced, my kids were grown and out, and Bridget lived in Charlotte with a husband and a job she described as impossible to step away from. So it made sense, in the way these things always make terrible sense, that I would be the one. I cut my hours at the dental office down to part-time. Then I cut them more. I learned which pharmacy on Schrock Road had the shortest line, learned to line up the pill bottles on the windowsill in the order she took them, the white ones at breakfast, the oval ones at night. I learned the particular sound she made when she'd fallen and was too proud to call out. And I want to be honest with you because this isn't a story about a saint. I did it out of love, yes, but I also did it because some part of me believed it would mean something. I believed that being the one who showed up was a kind of currency, that it would be seen. Bridget came up maybe twice a year. She'd fly into Columbus, stay 3 nights, post a photo on Facebook of her and mom, always mom in her good cardigan, hair done because I'd done it that morning. "So grateful for this time with my mama," she'd write, and 400 people would react with hearts. Then she'd fly home and I'd go back to the pill bottles and the 3 a.m. falls. There were signs. I see them now, lit up like exit ramps I drove straight past. There was the time Bridget asked me, very casually, over the phone, whether mom's house was still in just her name. I thought it was a strange question, and then I thought nothing of it because I had a roast in the oven and mom needed her medication. There was the Christmas Bridget spent 2 hours in mom's bedroom with the door closed, just catching up, and came out with her eyes bright in a way I told myself was emotion. There was the new accountant Bridget recommended, the one who specialized in elder situations who I never actually met. Little things. A casserole dish that went missing. A folder of mom's papers that wasn't in the drawer where it had always been. I dismissed all of it. Not because I was foolish, I want you to understand that, but because when you are pouring everything you have into keeping one person alive and comfortable, you do not have a single ounce left over to imagine that someone you love is quietly working against you. Suspicion is a luxury. I couldn't afford it. So when Bridget called me 3 weeks before mom died and said, "I think I should come up and help with some of the paperwork, take that off your plate," I cried. I actually cried with gratitude. I said, "Thank you, Bridget. Thank you." I made up the guest room. I bought the coffee she likes. I had no idea I had just handed her the key. Bridget's idea of helping with the paperwork looked, at the time, like a blessing. She'd sit at mom's dining room table with her laptop and a stack of folders, and she'd say things like, "You focus on mom, I'll handle the boring stuff." And God help me, I was so tired that boring stuff sounded like a gift. I'd be in the bedroom changing sheets or crushing a pill into applesauce, and I'd hear her on the phone in that low, even voice, the one she used for clients. I assumed it was work. I want you to sit with how reasonable that assumption was. Your sister flies in to help you bury your mother, and you assume the phone calls are about your mother. Mom passed on a Saturday morning just after the light came up. I was holding her hand. Bridget was at the hotel. She'd stopped staying at the house because the guest bet hurt her back, which I now understand was about something else entirely. I called her and she arrived 40 minutes later, already dressed, already composed. She stood at the foot of the bed and she said, "Well, she's at peace now." Not a tear. I told myself grief looks different on everyone. The funeral was Monday. Bridget gave the eulogy. She'd ask me gently if she could, "You've done so much already. Let me carry this part." And she stood up in St. Paul's and talked about their bond, their special closeness, the long phone calls. People came up to me afterward and said what a beautiful tribute it was. One of Mom's old neighbors, a kind woman named Darlene, who'd known us since we were girls, squeezed my arm and whispered, "She was lucky to have you at the end, honey." We all saw who was here. I held on to that sentence like a railing. And then it was Tuesday, and Bridget was unlocking the front door with a key I didn't recognize, and the lawyer was setting his leather folder down on the dining room table where she'd done all that boring stuff. His name was Mr. Halverson. He had a soft, apologetic manner, which I've since learned is the most dangerous kind. He asked me to sit down. He said there were some matters regarding the estate that had already been settled, and that Bridget, as the holder of power of attorney and the named beneficiary on the relevant accounts and the property, would be handling the transition. I said, "The property? You mean the house?" And Bridget, not the lawyer, Bridget said, "Colleen, Mom and I worked all this out a while ago. The house, the savings, it was her wish. I know that's hard to hear. Her wish. The savings I'd watched her worry over. The house I'd kept clean and warm for 6 years. I didn't scream. I want you to know that, because I think there's a version of me that the old me would have expected. The one who breaks dishes. But something very cold and very clear came over me instead. I said one thing. I said one thing, Bridget. And Bridget's face did something. A tiny flinch, a Richelt's face did something. A tiny flinch, a recalculation. And she said, "Does it matter?" And I knew. I knew right then, the way you know a step is missing in the dark. Let me ask you something before I go on, because I need to know I'm not alone in this. Tell me where you're watching from. What city, what country? And tell me honestly, has someone in your own family ever smiled at you across a table while they were taking something from you? I need to know I'm not the only one who learned this the hard way. Because here is what I did next. I did not argue with Mr. Halverson. I thanked him calmly, and I walked out to my car, and I sat in that driveway and I shook for 10 minutes. And then I drove to the one person I trusted completely. My friend Renata, who had worked beside at the dental office for 11 years, whose husband happened to be a probate attorney in Dublin. I told her everything in her kitchen over a cup of coffee I never drank. And Renata, who is the most no-nonsense woman I have ever met, set down her mug and said, "Colleen, when exactly did your mother's signature start mattering, and when did she stop being able to give it?" And that question cracked the whole thing open. Because here is what I had, and didn't yet understand that I had. For 6 years, I had kept a care journal, a cheap spiral notebook from the drugstore, then another, then a whole shelf with them. Every dose, every appointment, every bad day. I'd written down, without ever meaning it as evidence, the exact week Mom stopped being able to follow a conversation. The week she signed her name Eleanor with the letters trailing off because her hand wouldn't hold the line. I had dates. I had the neighbor Darlene who'd sat with her. I had the pharmacy records. And I'd forgotten until that night, lying awake. I had a video. On one of Mom's last good afternoons months back, she'd been lucid and warm, and she'd taken my hand and said she wanted me to have the house. That I'd earned it, and I'd had my phone out filming her because she was singing along to Patsy Cline. And I wanted to remember her happy. I had filmed the truth without knowing I'd need it. Renata's husband, Paul, met with me that Thursday. He was quiet and thorough, the opposite of Mr. Halverson's soft apologies. He spread my notebooks across his conference table and the pharmacy printouts, and he watched the video of Mom singing twice, all the way through. When it ended, the second time he took off his glasses and said, "Colleen, the documents your sister filed are dated in March. Your journals show your mother couldn't reliably sign her own name by February. That's not a small problem for her. That's the whole case." What followed wasn't a screening match. I want to be honest about that, because people expect the satisfying explosion, and real justice almost never sounds like one. It sounded like certified letters. It sounded like a petition filed in the Franklin County Probate Court contesting the transfers on the grounds of undue influence and lack of capacity. It sounded like Paul, very politely, requesting the originals of every document Bridget had signed, and the appointment records of the accountant she'd recommended, the one I'd never met, who, it turned out, had notarized a signature on a day my journal showed my mother had been in the emergency room with a fever of 103. Bridget called me 4 times before I picked up. When I finally did, her voice had lost the even client tone. "Colleen, what are you doing? You're going to drag Mom's name through court?" She wanted this. And I said the only thing I'd been waiting 6 years to say. I said, "Bridget, I have her on video telling me the truth. I have the dates. I have Darlene. I'm not dragging Mom's name anywhere." I'm the only one in this family still protecting it. There was a long silence, and then she hung up, which is how I knew Paul was right. The case never reached a courtroom in the end. They almost never do when the paper trail is that clear. Bridget's own lawyer, Mr. Halverson, with his leather folder, withdrew once he saw the medical timeline and the video, because no attorney wants his name near a signature obtained from a woman who couldn't track a conversation. There was a mediation in a beige room with a long table. Bridget didn't look at me. She sat with her arms crossed while the mediator walked through the evidence, and at one point, when the video played and Mom's voice filled that beige room singing crazy off key, Bridget put her hand over her mouth. I'd like to tell you it was guilt. I think it was just the sound of our mother alive saying the thing Bridget had spent so much energy trying to bury. We settled. The house came back into the estate and was divided the way it should have been from the start. And because the court found the transfers improper, the legal costs came out of Bridget's share, not mine. But I'll be honest with you about something because this is the part nobody tells you. Winning did not feel like winning. It felt like standing in a field after a storm, looking at what was still standing and what wasn't. I got the house. I lost a sister. Both of those things are true, and one did not cancel the other. It's been 6 months now. I sold the house in Westerville. I couldn't sleep in it, not after everything, and I think Mom would have understood that better than anyone. I bought a small place closer to Renata with a real garden, the kind Mom always wanted and never had time for. I planted her roses. I went back to the dental office full time, not because I need to, but because I like the order of it, the small certain tasks, the people who say thank you. Darlene and I have lunch every few weeks. She's the last living thread to whom my mother actually was, and I hold on to her. Bridget and I don't speak. I don't say that with drama. There were no final words, no movie scene closure. The line just went quiet and stayed quiet. Sometimes I see she's posted a photo of Mom on Facebook, thinking of you, Mama, and I let it be. I know what I know. I don't need 400 hearts to confirm it. Here's what I learned, and I'll give it to you plainly, because if you've made it this far, you've probably lived some version of this yourself. Love is not currency. I spent 6 years believing that if I showed up enough, sacrificed enough, was good enough, it would be recognized and rewarded. That the showing up was a kind of deposit I'd one day get back. It isn't. People who love you don't keep a ledger, and people who are keeping a ledger were never loving you in the first place. Do the caretaking because it's right, because it's your mother, because you can get yourself afterward. Not because you expect it to be seen. But there's a second thing, and it's the one I want to leave you with. Keep your records, not out of suspicion, out of respect for the truth. I never wrote a single word in those notebooks thinking I'd defend myself with them. I wrote them because my mother deserved to have every day of her life witnessed. And in the end, the simple act of telling the truth, daily and faithfully, was the thing that protected both of us. The people who underestimate you are counting on you having nothing. Have something. Not a weapon, just the truth, written down exactly as it happened. My mother sang off key in a kitchen on a Tuesday afternoon and told me I'd earned my place. I believed her then. I believed her now. And no lawyer, no key I didn't recognize, no sister in a gray blazer was ever going to take that from me.